television camera transmitting the lecture to several other rooms, so they will be looked after elsewhere. It's a pleasure to come together this evening, particularly with our colleagues from the British Council, led by Director General John Hanson, with whom it's been a great pleasure to, in the last few days, work on presenting the work of Charles Correa. Charles has been about the school continually since his arrival in London 2 weeks ago. His energy, his enthusiasm, and I must say his sense of perfection has rippled through the AA as he formed and reformed the exhibition. I can see how the man and the work are truly one. It is quite splendid. This evening is in two parts. Now the lecture, and then at 7 o'clock the official opening of the exhibition. To introduce the lecture, I call upon a distinguished graduate of the AA and long-standing friend and colleague of Charles, Brian Richards. Brian.
Just a word of correction. I'm not a graduate of the AA. I went to Liverpool. However, I did have the privilege of teaching here for 4 years. And when the British Council raised this question of an exhibition, we thought of several venues and settled for the AA, and all I can say is thank God we did. The exhibition has been, I think, quite a great deal of excitement for those that worked on it. I and my wife Sandra were only involved for the last 2 days. The rest have been involved for over 2 weeks. I'm absolutely exhausted. I don't know how they feel. However, I'm really here to welcome Charles and Monica Correa. It's a great privilege to have them here in London. And they're very old friends from 25 years back. And I think it is a great privilege to have this show here. It's the first exhibition Charles has ever had outside of India. And that, I think, is really a first for the AA. It's an enormous privilege to have them here. They are full of enthusiasm. They really embody the spirit of India. And I think you'll find that comes through in the exhibition. The only thing that doesn't come through really is what India means, what it's like outside those buildings, and what it must mean to have achieved those buildings in the Indian condition. Remember, outside those buildings, it's chaos. Really, that's India. And Charles has managed to produce these incredibly serene buildings, God knows how, and God knows with how many contractors. I know one of the buildings, the State Centre, is still under construction, and it will be 2 years before it's built. But the others are built, and I've only had the privilege of being in one of them just 2 weeks ago. It was a very hot 2 days, and most of the time I spent quietly sitting in one of the very splendid rooms, namely the canteen, in fact, except there was nothing to drink and no tea. But fans were whirring, and the last thing I thought of in the exhibition this evening was the only thing that's missing is a punka fan suspended from the ceiling going full blast. But really, Charles, it's a great privilege to have you here, and thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you, Brian, for those words, and I should really thank the British Council to begin with for having this exhibition, which is really a very generous gesture from them. Of course, to the AA for staging it, and to Alan, and to all the people who helped put it up, Linda and Andrew and their whole crew who really worked for these 10 days. And of course, Sudhakar Nadkani, who designed it and who came to London, I think, hopefully for a holiday, but has been working very hard. And to all the people, including my hairdresser, my wife. I love the way that at the Academy Awards they always say my hairdresser. I think very important. But anyway, I really meant the other thank yous. I'm only fooling about but I meant the other thank yous. In fact, I think it's when Mr. Hansen wrote and said that we are thinking of having an exhibition of your work in London, and he said, please include our building. He was that kind and generous. And I was quite stunned, because it's almost impossible out of India, where we don't even have film, we don't have Kodak film processed. So it meant not only getting professional photographers, and I purposely chose people, some of them who weren't actually, they didn't photograph architecture, because I wanted them to get the mood, and some were of course architectural professionals, photographers. But we had to get the film from London and then fly it back here to be processed, and fly it back to India to be edited, and then fly it back here to be enlarged, etc., etc. So it really is an incredible logistic problem apart from everything else. And that's the reason I think you don't really get an exhibition coming out of India. It's another end of the world. But anyway, finally I think the whole thing is together. I hope when the door opens it will all be there. Well, when Mr. Hansen mentioned this building, the British Council, I wondered what I could add to that, which other projects. And I decided to choose a theme which has interested me very much right from the beginning of my career, but which I have just completed 5 projects. Well, there are 4 completed, and the 5th has been going on for about 6 years, but should be finished in a year's time. 6 years of construction, that means about 8 to 9 years altogether. That's the state capitol, which Brian mentioned. Now, all these 5 buildings deal with the theme of what I call the ritual pathway. I think that's a very central theme in a warm climate. I think as I sit here in this London's quite cold. I know it gets colder, but it's cold enough. And you realize that one has quite a different attitude to built form. You have to be right inside a room like this to feel secure. In India, it's quite the opposite. In fact, you would feel very uncomfortable in a room like this, unless, of course, it was air-conditioned or it was winter in Delhi. But in Bombay, throughout the year, you'd never sit like this in comfort. So our sense of what is built form and our relationship to it is totally different. I have a number of slides, so I think I would start right away with the first 2 slides, if I may. You see, the great temples we see in South India, it's not just the gopurams themselves, but the spaces in between, which make this kind of movement, which of course in the temple is a sacred movement called pradakshina, or in the stupas. And it means that to be in the open place is actually the nicest place to be. In fact, what you get out of the architecture at its best is the kind of gesture, what we call the chhatri, which is an umbrella. It's a kind of gazebo, I guess, a kind of pavilion, which gives you the sense of order, of architectural order, but really allows the breeze to go through, etc. Now, I purposely show you these slides to show you exactly the opposite of this kind of architecture, which is in a cold climate where you have a box, and you have a sealed box, and you have to enter the box at a point you call the front door, and you're either inside the box or outside the box. They're both of them. I think we can go there. Might be easier. Now, this is in Central Asia, but it's typical all over Asia and certainly of India, that you get this, and this is in a mud village in China, and you have a front door, but once you get through the door, you see how ambiguous is the space. The only reason you've got such a clear front door is that it's Kashgar, an Islamic village, so the front door is still important. Next. And you can see how you come out, and you, on the left this is, and you can see the, where does that stick here? You can see that one steps out from a room, you step out onto a pergola, onto a terrace, etc. Even Fatehpur Sikri on the right, the left-hand slide, please, can you change? you can see here that there are layers which change gradually the sense of enclosure. And you choose different points of that building depending on the time of the day, and you move through it all the time, from one section to the next. Yeah, next to. Now, sometimes this movement, this pathway starts climbing upwards, and that's very, very important. It's one of the basic mechanisms in the human being, I think almost primordial. This is in Borobudur, as you know, in Indonesia, and you've got a perfect model. I think Malraux called this the most perfect building in the world, and the only thing he compared with it was Chartres Cathedral. He said, and the only closest thing in Europe where you have made a total model, an accurate model, or a passionate model really, of what are your central beliefs. This is, of course, is Buddhist and is a representation of the 7 stages of nirvana, 7 levels. And you climb up this central path, as you see. Next. And when you reach the top, under these bells you find the Lord Buddhas, and some of them they're open, and he's sitting under the open sky. And that's a very, very important thing, because in Asia, in India, the idea of being in the open air is very, very important. Could I have the left slide, please? On the right. As you know, the enlightenment comes really not in a room like this, but under the open sky. And that's why the teacher usually sits under a tree. And I found this also was true this is in West Africa, where there's nothing but these mud houses, but it's the trees which structure the whole village. And they're a very powerful structure, but they don't seem to be architectural, but of course that's how their village unites and meets under that tree. Next. Here we have open to sky space in Islam. That's a mosque on the right, and here on the left is in Bali. And you can see again the movement upwards and then reaching finally the place which becomes sacred. I think it's what Corbusier called the architectural promenade, because in his time, like in our time, of course, in this century, one feels embarrassed to use this word sacred, but I think really that's what he meant was sacred, and that's why he could do Ranchamp. He had a very great sense of the sacred, though he never specifically that I know of used that word. The right-hand slide, please. And now when I come to the Acropolis, I find very much to me the same mechanism. You climb up the hill, you go through these spaces which are like a pilgrimage, and you finally reach the point where the gods are. And I know that the Parthenon, and then you finally reach the Parthenon, and I know that the Parthenon has many other layers of decision making, including the marble, including the order of the columns. The right-hand slide, please. But to me, the basic mechanism is this movement, which is what is my theme of the 5 projects which I present and which are my talk today. The left hand. Now, what happened is that the people from Northern Europe went down to Greece, saw this wonderful architecture. In other words, the warm climates of the world generated these forms, and then the cold climates developed the rich economies, and then they said, how do we take this back with us and make it into the Bank of England? So they took it, and they take the columns and they make it as wallpaper. And then we discuss how should the wallpaper look. In the left, yeah, the one on the right either. You see, and whether you tattoo the building with structure, like on the right, or you tattoo it with whimsy or with history, it's different from one on the right, from this. The architectural problem is totally different. Now, I'm not saying therefore you should all go out in the cold, but I'm only trying to tell you what it is, what architecture is for me. And though I must say this, I went and saw Howard Hodgkin's very beautiful exhibition, and one of the nicest things about it was the fact that it's in 3 separate galleries and 3 separate little houses. So you have a chance to come out onto the street again and go into another one. And I think in a way it was a kind of procession, a kind of pathway. Yeah, left. I think at these moments when we are in the, when we have the sense of openness, we really are, the right hand one please. I think we remember a kind of lost paradise For instance, any house around a courtyard sets up that what you call the axis mundi, which goes from the ground straight up to the sky. And there's something about the centrality of that which is totally riveting, because it must reflect something in the deep structure of our brain, of our mind, so that regardless of where the house is, whether it's made of mud or of aluminium, it always moves you. This, of course, is in Pompeii, and it's got this huge scale, and yet it seems totally human. Left. Now, this theme, in other words, I always was interested in right from my student days, but intuitively I knew that for India we needed things like that. I'll show you a few projects and go back to some themes. This is the first one I did. This is the house of Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi, that is, in Ahmedabad at the ashram, and it's built around a courtyard. It's very simple. You can see the front veranda, which is very traditional, so it's different from the colonial veranda, but it's basically the same purpose. You sit in a space which is very pleasant because it's not enclosed and stuffy. Those were his last possessions on the right, which I think are wonderful, because this man really, like Mao Zedong, was a great leader who had no aesthetic sense whatsoever, I think. I'm just guessing wildly. But I think this is a very high aesthetic, what you see on the right, that someone dies and leaves behind those little bundle of things. It tells you really, that's really a fine mind. Left. So in this memorial, which was done many years ago, it must be over 30 years ago, I tried to express that this was a national memorial to him, and it was really to house his letters and photographs, etc. So I enclosed those spaces, but I left a kind of open, connecting verandas. And yes, the next two. And I didn't try to copy the old building. I tried to kind of reinvent it, but using the same materials, which was stone floor and tiled roofs. And of course, the element added is this gutter, which is a channel which allows the building to grow, which I thought was important. In fact, it has grown since then, because you discover more letters and more books, etc., and photographs. And we don't have any windows. We only have these louvers for the breeze to go through. I thought that Gandhiji it was felt that he was against industrialization, and somehow at that time I thought windows looked industrialized, so we did this thing, which, anyway, next. So you see, you get these kind of spaces which are neither enclosed nor are they open. They are ambiguous. They allow the definition. It's really a series of layers of architectural form. Next to. This is from the ashram, but the one on the right is another building which was done much later in the mid-70s. It's an art center in Bhopal, in which I came down the hill with 3 courtyards. Yes, the next two. You can see that the way the plan works there, the 3 courtyards, and the way you come down these steps. And as you're coming down, you're going down through layers until you reach a courtyard, one of the 3. And at that point, you can enter kind of caves which have got different facilities. There's a whole bunch of facilities which kept changing. Yeah, next, we just go fast through the. You can see the walk down, and there's a lake ahead of it. Yes, next. Yeah, next. And then there are places, of course, for people to sit, and it's quite successful, because the people who come are absolutely of that town. Is not a very, it's used by everybody, even poor people, and they come to use the garden, and then they can go into one of the entrances or caves, let's say, and they can see some art, or they can hear a concert, or see a play, and it's very, very inexpensive because it's subsidized, so it's a highly popular thing. It's where Peter Brooks went, I think, to do when he was going to do the Mahabharata. So it also has very sophisticated people working there. Yeah, next. That shows you the light. Oh, this is some tribal thing, but that's the light coming in. Next. The enclosed. I really wanted to show you some of the displays to show you that this, for instance, this section is all tribal art. And you begin to see, I couldn't find a slide actually better than this. One on the left, you can see that in these patterns, in the thing people live with in India, and one on the right, this is a tantric drawing. There is a sense of the sacred, there is a sense of something invisible, the invisibility of life, the non-manifest world, which is continuously present. So when we see this beautiful art, whether it's traditional or coming from other source than the modern, we find that people do this thing very often without even knowing why. Sometimes, of course, they know why, but sometimes it's just a memory of a very, very important mythic image or value. The one on the right, most people in India would know, is the Sri Yantra. It's the most sacred single diagram, I think not only to Hinduism but to Jainism and Buddhism. It's triangles, 5 and 4, male and female, upside down and straight away up. And the center of the center is the source of energy. And to contemplate it is considered in itself to be very beneficial. On the left? Stuff? Oh, it doesn't matter. It's another one from Nepal. On the right? Here, for instance, is the cosmograph, the giant cosmograph, which is a wonderful drawing showing the entire universe, the entire manifest world, every river, every tree, every animal. And the left-hand one, could you change that, please?
Sorry, on the screen.
And that's okay, you don't have to worry about that slide, Catherine. You just change the next one. And you can see that in this drawing, the center of that drawing is an axis mundi. It's the most important point, it's the source of that energy. Something gone wrong with that? Sorry. Oh God, really? Why don't you just switch to the next one then? God, sorry. What has happened? Anyway, I became interested in this. I might as well fill up the time while we're about this. That I became interested in this because about 8 or 9 years ago, I had to do an exhibition on Indian architecture, and we formed a committee for. In fact, Sudhakar designed the exhibition, and it was part of the Festival of India, and we made a list of buildings, and I thought all the new ones would be full of ideas and the old ones would be beautiful. But on the contrary, I found that the old ones were not only the most beautiful, but they were full of ideas. They were really polemic. For instance, yeah, could you change this one on the left? For instance, this is the first Buddhist stupa. This is at Sanchi, which is very near Bhopal. Now look, it's almost an exact three-dimensional model of that drawing on the right. So they really built what they felt, what their lives were about, their society was about, what the universe was about, what the cosmos, etc. In the center of this is of course just earth, it's not empty. And in the center is a wooden pole, very much like the one I'm holding in my hand, which is actually the axis mundi of the world, right? And around it is this walkway, the pradakshina, the sacred walkway, which really answers, again, as I was saying earlier, a very basic human need, because I find this not only occurs in Buddhism and Hinduism, I see it in Italy. People make these processions or novenas, what have you, and walk around the church. And I'm sure it occurs here in England too. Left. Now, where did this come from? In Hinduism, there's something called the Vastu Purush Mandala, which is the mandala we all know about, and it forms the basis of architecture. And the center, which we've been looking at, is always empty. And it's simultaneously the source of all energy. It's bindu. In fact, it's what the Indian Hindu woman would wear on her forehead. right? Now, a square like that can be subdivided into 4 squares, 9 squares, as you saw, or 64, of 81, etc. And then the temples usually are 64 or 81, and then each god is assigned a place. But the center is always Brahman, which means the all-pervading principle. And that means the Hindu would believe that, when all the incarnations are over, you don't go to heaven, and you don't go to the garden of paradise, you disappear into Brahman, into the all-pervading principle. That means really you go down into a vortex to me of energy, very much like a black hole. And it seems to me that, because in these projects I will return to this theme, that the paradigm is constant. In the 5,000 years ago they used phrases like the mandala, etc. Today we call it black hole. It seems that there is something in us, it's the same human mind, which finds this idea of the center of something being the source of all energy and yet being empty extremely important. So it reflects something in our own minds. Left. For instance, this is Modera, and you can see here not only the temple as model of the cosmos, but this wonderful thing called a kund, which is a kind of place for bathing. It's just a big tank of water, but it's very clever, because as the water goes down, the relationship of you to the water stays constant. You can go on with your rituals at any given level. It's on all 4 sides. Next. Next. And you see how important it is, because from this water rises then the access up to the skies, to the sacred sky above. Now you can see the steps on the right. Could you change one on the left? Here, this Sabali Kund, which is a much later one, and then on the right. Now see, in this Sabali Kund, this is a Muslim, this is after the arrival of Islam. The 4th side of the Kund has become a pleasure palace. The one on the left. Can you see that? That means you have really a lovely palace that as the water level goes down, it keeps cool as you go into the hot season, right? Now why did that happen? Because the paradigm, the sacred image for Islam is the Garden of Paradise, which is also an imaginary mythical landscape, but different from the cosmograph. The cosmograph thought about the cosmos. This is a wonderful ideogram about a garden of paradise, of pleasure, of earthly pleasures, let's say. Left, that's both. And it leads to a totally different architecture. It leads to a hedonistic, beautiful, voluptuous architecture, which is very sensuous in its feeling. The same materials, the same workmen, I would imagine, and yet a totally different attitude. Left, right. With the arrival of the Europeans, yeah, right. We get, I'm sorry, that's back to front. You get the myths of the age of reason, the myths of science, the myths we all live under, that there's such a thing as progress and everything else follows. Industrialization, what have you. Left. And it has its, yes, next to. It has its benefits. It brings things like this. It also, I would think that, I just picked up that slide. I had to choose an example. I think it's a good one of Moshe Safdie, as you know, Habitat, done many years ago. I think that would have been impossible for a Buddhist architect to do. And at the same time, Moshe probably wouldn't do the stupa. It shows how the mind changes. But it also tells, it's a good picture to illustrate something else, and that is that it would be oversimplistic to say this is only the age of reason. That is the myth behind the mythic image or value, because obviously Moshe is very much moved by other mythic images like the gardens of Babylon, etc. So in other words, it's much more like a series of transparent layers, what is called a palimpsest, which allows you at a given point, any one of us in this room is many layers of these kind of instincts and images and values. Yeah, left. Oh, just the one on the left. I like this one because I took this slide, I think, in Leningrad in 62, and this building on the right had been built in 1928, at the time when they were very, as you know, avant-garde. And this building on the left had just been completed in '62. So I thought it was screamingly funny that the Russians were doing this, you know. And actually 20 years later, I find the Americans are doing this and the Russians are doing that. So 20 years later to change again. And so the shift of these paradigms, which we laugh at, is very, very important to me. I think they are like invisible strings that pull us. We have a grab bag of images, of some sort of notions, and also over which we don't really have that much control. One on the right. Just to sum this section up, I wanted to say that to me at least, architecture is, of course there's culture, which is like a reservoir. Let's imagine architecture is that point there. Then I would say it's like a reservoir of culture, and there's something called aspiration, which is very, very dynamic. Culture is much slower to change, but aspirations can change, of course. The left. And the third factor is climate, which I've been discussing with you, how climate not only affects you directly, but it affects culture, and therefore has a deep structured relationship with architecture. And the fourth is technology. Now, something like a Gothic cathedral is a wonderful expression of the culture of Europe in the Middle Ages and the aspirations and the climate and of course the technology of stone. The question comes up that what do we do when the technology changes? We run out of stone. Should we build the same images in steel, or should we realize that this point should change and maybe there's another expression in the new technology of the same culture and the same aspirations, or etc. In other words, you have to reinvent the expression of that myth, of those mythic values. And that's why architecture to me is a very important art, not because it's very pure art, it isn't. We have to deal with the contractors and with the marketplace, as Brian said. It's very tough, but it's very important because it throws that challenge to society every 30 or 50 years, which is not true in music, not true in the other arts. Architecture, every time the technology changes, society has to decide, are we going to just transfer the old images and the new materials, or are we going to reinvent the expression of those values? In fact, I would think that one of the things a man like Corbusier did was every one of his buildings is Mediterranean. He really reinvented the Mediterranean without using a red tiled roof. He reinvented it in what he thought were 20th century materials. That is, I think, a true transformation of the expression. One on the right. I like these two slides. This to me is a transfer. I thought it was a joke picture. I copied it from somewhere, but when I was once in Kuwait, it was true. You take a piece of AstroTurf and you play golf. That's one on the left, please. And this is a very good example of transformation, where something like the railways came to the subcontinent, to Pakistan and India, were totally something imported, and yet over 100 years have become ingested, internalized, and now we have a thing which is run absolutely by people at this level, who are not really particularly educated or trained, but who know exactly how their part in the system. So next two, please. So I thought I would take you, there are 5 projects in the room, and I thought I would take you in a little depth through one and then the others very briefly. This one is in Jaipur, which is a beautiful city. It's called the Pink City. It was done by this man who lived in this palace, Jai Singh, about 300 years ago. And it's a city where you have to use the pink sandstone, or you have to paint your building pink. The left one, please. The right. Yeah, this shows the old city, and you can see the walls, and you can see the courtyards, and you can see how interesting it is that sometimes the form, like in this case, is it's freestanding pavilion in the center, but sometimes it's the built form is attached to the walls. And you get walls like this which have an architectural order, and then they have a painterly order which is superimposed and which doesn't always register. So there's a slight syncopation. On the right. And then of course there's the moment that you can go right through to the next courtyard. Here you can see the paint on the wall. The left. There's another aspect also to Jaipur, and that's shown in a building like this, the Palace of the Winds. It's quite extraordinary because, the one on the right, because it's got a stone facade which is perforated, what we call a jali, a screen, and it's got those little wooden windows, and in the hot, dry weather, which Brian was talking about, instead of sitting in that cafeteria, if he had come here, they would wet the stone, and then the breezes would be humidified. So it's really a machine for living, but of course there are many, many other embellishments, etc. to the form. It's a very exuberant building. Next. Now, how did that building come about? It's because Jai Singh was tremendously moved by the newest myths, which are the myths of science. When I say myths, I don't mean lies, I just mean, you know what I mean, a very powerful, compulsive forces of that century. And these are the famous instruments he built in 5 towns, this is in Jaipur, for measuring the sun and the stars. And they're extraordinarily complex. They're built in masonry with marble. The left, please. Now that's a close-up of that thing, and you can see these are warped surfaces. And the one on the right, which are very accurately calibrated, so that you can get and of course the masonry can't move, so it's the most accurate way of measuring the sun and the shadows. Yeah, left. Now at the same time, Jai Singh was also very much moved by the oldest myths he knew. And those are the myths of the mandala, which we discussed. So for the plan of Jaipur, he chose the mandala of the 9 planets. And since there was a hill here, he moved this planet here. One on the right. And that's the way he got the plan. At least that's what most people think. Though that's also sometimes questioned. But the center of it all is a garden for the palace, which has to be kept empty, as I told you. So I was very moved by this idea that somebody sort of had these 2 ways of looking backward and looking forward, but in one gesture of creating Jaipur. So left. You can see here, for instance, that the 9 planets and how these are some of the symbols. The one on the right. That's a lovely drawing, a gouache of an old one. Of each planet has its own color, its own character, etc., etc. Left. So when I was asked to design the Nehru Museum in Jaipur, it's only named after Nehru, it's an art center actually, I thought that just like you would move this thing, I thought of going back to the mandala and reinterpreting it as a contemporary building. And I moved 1 square so that you can enter. Left, right, please. Like that. Yeah, left. And you can see that their 9 plans are totally different. The right one. And those are the symbols of the planet. Left. And you see that the opening between planets, each is 100 feet on side, but it consists of courtyards and buildings. And only over here do we have a more porous connection. Otherwise, it's just one opening in the center of the planet. So you can step into another world on the right. This shows the open to sky space and the covered space, etc. So you can also walk through it as a pedestrian path, which is the pilgrimage I'm talking about. Left. So here we come, here's the building, and we've entered through right there where that gate is. That's the symbol of the mandala itself, of the 9 planets. And these are the symbols of each planet. These are all traditional symbols, these are not made up. Yeah, and let's go on, right? The one on the right. Yeah, you're coming through, you come into this plaza. Now, then you come to the first planet, which is the Mangal, which is the planet of power. So we made a mistake. First of all, I thought each planet should be connected with the program. So, for instance, Guru, which means teacher, we put the library. In Mangal for Pa, I put the director. And Alan would like that, I'm sure. But anyway, the thing is, he turned out to be a terrible chap, but luckily they transferred him. But all that went to his head, and this is a wonderful drawing done by a painting, done by a traditional artist, the best in Rajasthan, where they've taken that cosmograph and put it into 3 dimensions, which is a very tough thing to do, right? You know, this comes from a tradition. In this building, I was determined to try and bring into architecture in a way which wasn't patronizing or anything like that, the traditional arts of India, especially of Rajasthan. This shows typically in all over India, but certainly in Rajasthan and in this part called Shekhawati, they decorate their houses even on the outside. And the drawings they make are very narrative, very episodic. On the left, for instance, this is a family which would be a big Marwari business family. So this is the train which must have taken the big Saab to Calcutta. That might have been a wedding or something, right? Yeah, so that is what we use. Yeah, just go ahead with the left too, please. That's the whole cosmos. Yeah, change them both together. That's the artist painting that. Yeah, next. We had some very good advisors. Halfway through, I found I really needed several scholars. There was a wonderful man called Manu Desai, who was a graphic artist in Bombay, but very interested in these things. And he did research and he found out all the various symbols available. And then we chose the one we liked. Like for instance, Rahu, which is the eclipse of the sun. That means when the moon covers the sun, we had a choice of this crocodile or this or this kind of Pac-Man eating the sun. And we chose this one. It's very nice, etc. And then the qualities. Yeah, next. Next two. So there's a drawing of each planet. Yeah. Next. The one on the right, please. This is the cafeteria. This is where Brian spent his time, and there is a bar there, I must tell you. It's like the A, very much like the A. And what we had is 28 tables which go all the way from white to black. Well, I should tell you, sorry, it's Chandra, which is the planet, which is the moon. And the moon has the quality of being, the color has to be the feathers of a pigeon near the neck, and and it has the neck feathers, a soft mauve, let's say. And it's a pleasure, the moon, the qualities. So we put the cafeteria there, and we made the 28 phases of the moon as the tables. Yeah, next to. So I just very briefly show you. This is in Ketu, where one of the mythic stories is about Krishna, the Lord Krishna, and this is painted again. I think that's a person standing there. So it's a very well, here you can see them too. It's a very large and I think beautiful kind of fresco which is done, or mural which is done very easily by these people and almost on the scale of well, the big cinema posters are the closest to this in India. I like that. It's sort of, it reaches immediately. Yeah, next to. Then this is Shani, where we've got the craftsmen. The whole planet is a street where people actually they work there. Next. Yeah, next to. Then in the center is this kund, which is, because they needed an amphitheater, I used that. But of course we don't have water in the center, instead of which we have a performing area or a place you can just sit down and look at. This is the red sandstone which you see on the outside. The inside of each planet is painted, it's plastered and painted. The outside stays stone, because, and this being the inside of the building, it becomes the outside, as I said, the emptiness. Yeah, next to. These are people just using the place, walking across. Actually, it's a very difficult place to walk across. And Sandra noticed it because she found people going up and down and finally giving up. Next. It's true. And leaving, I guess. Next to. This, for instance, is Rahu, which is the imaginary planet of the eclipse of the sun. And I actually literally took two circles, and that's one in black and one in white. And there's an axis mundi there in silver. Yeah. Then this is in Guru, looking out towards the kund in the center. And here I changed the mood completely. I thought we should have something. I like very much the work of Alvar Aalto, and I thought he did the best libraries of this. Some of the best libraries of Sandys around of this century. So I thought we should make a gesture to Aalto. By the way, there's just one woman crossing there. It's quite nice, but when people cross, they get sort of it becomes kind of kaleidoscopic. The two of them, one in red, one in yellow. Yeah, next to. these are just things of different planets and the colors. Next to. And this shows you then the symbols of the planets. Yeah, next. Which are marble and granite set into stone. In fact, for this exhibition, we brought you pieces of some of these buildings, including this one on the right, at a smaller scale, but we couldn't bring it at that scale. Next. You can see here that this is the wonderful one of the moon and the sun. And in this shot on the right, you can see how it reflects, the granite reflects the sky. Now this is, again, traditional workers working at, it's wonderful because these are the same, to me I tried to get this precision because those scientific instruments I showed you, those astronomy actually had that fantastic sense of precision through built materials. Next. Yeah, on the left. Yeah, I like this slide. And the one on the right, you know, this was, what I like is that sometimes in India when you're going to your office in Bombay, there'll be some little old woman under a tree making a model of the cosmos, just out of some white paint and all. And you don't pay any attention to her. You go to your office. So when you are trying to make a model of the cosmos, what I like about India is no one pays any attention whatsoever. Camels, it gives you a good sense of proportion, I think. Anyway, the one on the left. So the whole building to me is like a big packing case, and I always think of the one on the right. But it is a model of the cosmos, but it's also got this wonderful packing case look, and like in a packing case you're saying this side up. Okay, so that's one project. The next one, please. The others I'll go through very briefly. Now, while I was working on that, I thought how wonderful. That's supposed to be, it is a contemporary building based supposedly on a very old idea, an archaic idea of the cosmos. And I thought how wonderful if we could try to build a building of today based on today's understanding of the universe, that means the expanding universe of Professor Hoyle, etc. And luckily, just out of the blue, a chap called Narlikar, who's a mathematician who worked with Hoyle, a very brilliant mathematician, who phoned me and said, would you like to do this new center for us of astronomy, which he was going to start at Pune University. Yeah, left. So the problem, and the right too, sorry, both of them. I thought, how do we express then our new mythic images of what the universe is about, the blackness of outer space, the feeling of an expanding universe, etc. Of course, we had a program. I should tell you that each of these buildings has a practical program, and I'm not going to talk about that. This, of course, deals with classrooms and lecture work, etc., faculty offices, etc. But its real agenda, which is its secret agenda, is to try and express this notion of today's ideas of the universe. So you enter here between these two concrete columns, which are slightly touched with blue at the top, with a dry brush, because I wanted to feel that you're reaching for the sky. And this is the local black stone, which is quite ugly, I think. But I added more black, and then finally glossy black, so it reflects the sky. So you get black on black. Yes, go ahead. And you pass through, and then you enter the cone. Yes, on the left. And then on the right. Yeah, that's the central area. And on the left here, you see it there in everything, all the patterns here, really the imagery comes from science. This, I think, comes from fractal theory. That over there in the center is in the landscape is the radio telescopic picture of a real black hole in outer space, which sets up that kind of pattern. Yeah, next, both. And then to suggest the expanding universe, I took the kund as a traditional symbol of the cosmos, and I exploded the corners to try and say that this is how the energy goes out. So the planning here, although we have a square, when you see the drawings there, you see it's on the diagonal. By the way, on this picture here these are different. This is Galileo, etc., and Newton. We put four figures, but this is Aryabhatta, who's the earliest Indian scientist in the 13th century. And this is one of those columns with the blue at the top and the concrete next to. Yeah, we're sitting, here is the faculty area, and on the right is the library. We're sitting in the student area, and that's on the way to the housing. That's Einstein over here. It's raining because of the monsoon. On the right? Yeah, that's Einstein in the rain. I like that. Can you focus it, or is it sharp? It's very soft, yeah. Yeah, thanks. And yeah, left or both? Yeah. This is a black wall. Actually, that's just a watchman. He looks really sinister, dressed in black. Looks like something out of the Gestapo or something. But actually, he's not at all, right? Yeah, you can see the blackness of the outer walls of this thing. Of the 3 layers. I should have shown this earlier. Yeah, left. And then one of the walls ends at the end of the project in this yantra, which comes from which they use actually, because it's still absolutely something useful to them in their courses they teach. But we did it in black stone and with steel, as opposed to the one in Jaipur, which is marble and red stone, right? Oh. Now, so that's the second project. Now, the third project, which I go briefly to, again, could we change this one on the left, please, Catherine? This is the National Crafts Museum, where we had to show many different kinds of crafts, which you'll see there, including inner context, including village crafts, of course, then sacred crafts, temple crafts, and then palace crafts. And Mrs. Jaika, Gopal Jaika, who was my client, she said, let's not try and organize it by, all the wooden things together and all the leather things together, or by time, which century or geographically. Let us just say that these 3 things must coexist together. That we cannot say we don't need village crafts any more than we can say we don't need palace crafts. All 3 make India rich. And I thought that was a wonderful thing, so that's what we did. And this is what I'm showing you, just the public areas, rather like Howard's exhibition actually. You walk through down a street, and if you like what you see, you can go in, and there's several openings. So it's something also like that old building, that Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal I'd shown you. Yeah, the right, please. Oh, stop. It's this is in the village craft, the village courtyard, and now we move down towards the palace courtyard through the temple court. And whatever you're looking at, say that building on the right, is actually a real wooden facade, a haveli, which we brought and put there, which is like a rich man's house. Left, because this is at the entrance, and then on the right, this is the real chariot, etc., etc. So this is really a collage kind of building, because what is important is what is brought and put there. On the left. Now, from that project, this is another one, the 4th project, which is the one which is still under construction. It's almost finished. It's the one which really taught me a lot. It's the new Capitol, and it started in '82 or so, so it's been going on a long time. We'll put the one on the right. It is also in Bhopal, which is very near the Sanchi Stupa, but that's not the reason. The only reason it's round. Actually, it's on the top of a hill overlooking the city. It's as I told you, it's a state capital. It has an upper chamber, a lower chamber, a combined hall, and a library. And what I did, could we change one of these slides, the one on the right perhaps? No, the one on the left then? Yeah, we can put back the one on the right. What you're really looking at is that you've got different entrances, but you've really got 5 open spaces. And the offices are around them. And these are partly covered by pergolas or what have you, or a small opening at the top. And the big items like the upper house and the lower house are in the 4 corners, and the library and the combined hall. So that when people enter, the public cannot go through the whole building, but they can, by going up and going along these ramps, they can experience the accesses of the building and its spaces The VIPs, on the other hand, enter from here and they go in a different way, etc. So this is a building of different pathways interlocking. It's, to me, a very sad... Left, please. Yeah, on the right then. It's almost finished. I was hoping it would be finished in time for this show, but because politically that government was changed and it hasn't been finished. But to me it will be one of the most exciting buildings for us because it's extremely complex. It isn't separate compartments like the Jaipur building. It's got 9 squares, each of which is autonomous, so you can open a door like Alice in Wonderland and step into another world. In this space, in this building, the spaces are modulated. You have to go from bigger spaces down into small and then bigger, etc. again. Okay, left. Or the right one, sorry. The last building, the 5th one, is the British Council building, which you'll see over there. What we have here really is not a very large building. It's the library and offices and an auditorium. But so that was the practical program. But I was keen on trying to show the interfaces which has existed down the centuries between England and India, or Britain and India. And on the site, then what I did was we decided to set up 3 axis mundi. One is of Hinduism, one is of Islam, and one is of the Europeans when they arrived, of science, etc., and their own culture. And the whole thing is, of course, presided over by this entrance, which is the tree, the shade of a tree done by Howard Hodgkin. Yeah, next. This, for instance, is right right at the back of the site. This is the Bindu, the source of all energy. This is the head of Shiva done by Stephen Cox, who was here today. From the hair of Shiva in myth came the Ganges, the holy river, the Ganga. And so that's the water here which comes down here. The next. And you can see that's what you were looking at back there. And then in between is the Charbagh, the Garden of Paradise of Islam, which you saw. And then the third one is the circle which we got from which is European, which I think is in Lachan's building in Delhi, the Viceroy's house, and I think which he got from Michelangelo. Yeah, left. And then presiding over the whole thing, and here in this entrance you can see all the way through to the back of the site. And you can see here now this great shade of a tree of Howard Hodgkin. Yeah, right? That's from the back looking to the front. Yeah, left. In this thing, it's a very complex kind of facade in which this you go up the stairs to the library, walking along this wonderful creation of Howard's. In fact, I think the New York Times, John Russell wrote a piece where he said, "In New Delhi pursued by a tree," or something like that. But it really chases you around the corner, right? Yeah, what he called big elephant ears. Yeah, left. Actually, Moneo came this morning, and Raphael, and he said a very interesting thing, because I told him to go and see this exhibition of Hodgkin, which he liked very much. And then he told me, which I told Ms. Hodgkin today, he said, "You're so lucky he didn't start painting the frame." I think that would have been a very interesting idea if he could have done that. By the way, this is not paint. This is actually, Hodgkin did this as a model, which you see inside there, his original model, at least. And then we translated that onto drawings, and then this is all inlay work. In fact, there's a piece of this inlay work which you'll see. On the right, please. So, which exactly, I think it's only in India that you could get this kind of thing of white marble and black Kadapa stone. Left. Then on the right, perhaps. Yeah. And you can see there, that's it. That's the sky above. Thank you very much.
Charles, thank you very much. We will reconvene here at 7 o'clock. I believe the exhibition is now open. We will slowly, we'll have to do it quite slowly, move through it all and have a chance to talk with Charles on the way. Again, thank you. This room will be cleared, so we can slowly move out and enjoy the exhibition.